y'all today, and it's gonna be good. What's going on? Hey, Carlton, Sam, Lisa, Kelly. I really do have something special for y'all today. Hey, Lisa. Good morning. Janet, what's going on? RJ, Sarabella, Juanita, and Sam Adams. Sam, I know everybody gives you that joke about the beer, so I'm not going to be give you that joke. James Wilburn, what up, though? James, are you from Detroit? If not, you're culturally appropriating. If you are, what up, though? Then I'm culturally appropriating. I'm sure. I guess y'all can hear me. I guess Juanita says yes. So I'm gonna start off with a story, right? So I don't know when it was, like in 2000. It had to be like 2017, maybe 2018, maybe earlier than that, maybe 2016. I when I wrote this obituary and I kind of centered it around my uncle. I had we call him Junior, but I had a uncle named James Beverly Anthony Walker. Good morning. And it kind of mushroomed from there. Um, and I'm going to try to see if I can pull it up so I can actually read some of the. But I guess I can't actually read some of the obituary for y'all. But anyway, it was about when I was like 7 or 8 years old. I was my uncle James used to have this cabin, not a cabin because he lived there. I guess it was just a house, but it was built, like a log cabin. But it was a huge house. Log cabins ain't what they used to be because his shit was nice, and it was on this lake in Elgin, South Carolina. We used to go out there. He had peacocks. I guess it was a pond, probably not a lake, because he had peacocks, dogs. He had two Rottweilers, and we used to go out there and just run around. And one day, we were out there running around, me and my cousin Tyron. And back then, I don't know if y'all old enough to remember the days when like you drank about 2 cups of water a day. Like I don't. Everybody's so hydrated now. Cause I wonder what did we used to do? Cause I don't remember drinking this much water when I was growing up. You might get one sip of water at school between classes when you're in the hallway at the water fountain. You got a pint of milk at school. And then that was about it. Like that was as hydrated as you were gonna get. You could drink out of the water hose, but that's about it. Like nobody was getting hydrated back then, right? Like we were very unhydrated, I guess. Pat Riley says Kool Aid. Yeah, well, see, I had ADD, so my mom wouldn't let me drink. Let us have 1 cup of Kool Aid a day. She would only let us have 1 cup of Kool Aid a day, and we couldn't even have the red Kool Aid. So we used to drink that terrible orange Kool Aid, the lemonade a lot. Anyway, yeah, we couldn't drink Kool Aid like that anyway, and so we went to my uncle's door to get some water. He just gave us these cups of water, handed them out the door. But while we were standing there waiting for our water, he was playing some music. And he used to have one of the businesses. My family always had like multiple businesses. So him and another uncle of mine had a mobile DJ company. I don't even know how it worked. I just know they had records, and I know I've seen the flyers and the signs for the mobile DJ company. I don't even know how it worked. I don't know if they had like a DJ truck, like a food truck. Lauren, yeah, I used to drink Tang too. Yeah, we used to drink a lot of nonsense. Capri Suns. We weren't rich enough to have Capri Suns, but anyway, when he brought back our water, I was like, yeah, what is that music? Because I grew up in a churchy household, so if it wasn't James Cleveland, I didn't know it, right? I might have heard of some Mississippi Mass Choir or some Hezekiah Walker, but other than that, like we only, I didn't know what the music was, but it sounded like it was no organs in it, and he told me it was a group named Earth, Wind, and Fire. And when he passed away, I wrote about that. He passed away on the same day as Maurice White. And I thought, that is kind of exemplifies his life. My uncle, I used to love. So ever since then, I love Earth, Wind, and Fire. And that's something that we shared. He used to have the 8 tracks of Earth, Wind, and Fire and reel the reels of Earth, Wind, and Fire. We would just sit there. So I learned about Earth, Wind, and Fire through him. So like people ask me what my favorite Earth, Wind, and Fire song was, and I would just kind of repeat what he told me. But I loved Earth, Wind, and Fire since then, and I wrote about that in his obituary. And I never knew, like, because I wrote so much, I never knew how often I reference Earth, Wind, and Fire. Apparently I reference them all the time, right? Um, like, are Earth, Wind, and Fire black famous? No white people know Earth, Wind, and Fire, right? But I said Earth, Wind, and Fire. I've written about how Earth, Wind, and Fire is a way better band than the Beatles. Anyway, I used to reference them all the time, just make little subtle references to them. And so one day, I remember it good. I was in Washington, D.C., and I had been traveling like for days. So I went to the hotel and I had like maybe 2 hours or an hour maybe before I had this speaking engagement. And it was at Georgetown University. I remember it well, right? So I was at Georgetown, which is kind of built like Hogwarts. If you've ever been to Georgetown, it's like a really, really old school. First of all, Georgetown University was financed. It was opened by the way they got the money to open Georgetown was they sold a bunch of slaves for real. Like look it up. Anyway, so I'm laying on the bed about to take me this nap. I got like maybe 30, 45 minutes to take me a nap. And the phone rings. And I don't know how celebrities get people's number. Like a celebrity, if you're a big enough celebrity, you can get anybody's number. So my phone rings, and it's the first thing they say is, "Yeah, how much you know about Earth, Wind, and Fire?" And I was like, "Well, I only know the music because I'm one of those people who really don't care about like I don't want to be on stage with you. I don't have to know your background. Like there are podcasts I enjoy and I don't even know how the people look on the podcast because I listen to them. And so I was like, yeah, I just know the music, right? And so he was like, well, you're a historian, right? So you could research them. And I was like, yeah. So it was Questlove. And he said he his next documentary was about Earth, Wind, and Fire, but he didn't. If you've ever seen a Questlove, what he called a Questlove joint, a Questlove joint, his documentaries aren't really about the thing that the documentaries are about. His documentaries are about something else, and he uses the subject of the documentaries to kind of explore another idea. So he said he wanted to explore the idea of metaphysics, African religion, um, you know, transcendental meditation, stuff like that, through the lens of and African spirituality, which was a big part of it, through the lens of Earth, Wind, and Fire. And again, I didn't know nothing about Earth, Wind, and Fire except for the music. I knew the music well. I even went to an Earth, Wind, and Fire concert, like one of the late concerts in the late 90s. at the Hollywood Bowl. And so he was like, "Well, do you want to be a part of this documentary?" And I was like, "Oh hell yeah!" Now, so to let y'all know, I've been a part of a lot of documentaries. Um, Even if you hadn't seen me on screen, but here's how documentaries work. I think most people think they just go film some stuff and then edit together a documentary. Nah, you have to get the story first, right? Like, so you create a story, and then you find the people and the footage to tell that story. So before we started on the documentary, it was my job to kind of get with Questlove and say, what story of Earth, Wind, and Fire do you want to tell? So he walked me through. First of all, he made me like, I mean, literally gave me a syllabus. Like, you got to read Maurice White's autobiography. You got to read this. You got to read this. You got to listen to this. Like, it was people I didn't know about. You got to listen. Do you know what Green Onions is? The song Green Onions is. Do you know about Booker T and the MJs? Like, I had to study all this stuff, and then listen to him and use that to tell the story. And so, you come up with this huge document that is essentially a narrative of what that film is going to be. And that was my job. And then to sit down during every single interview and just listen to the people talk as Questlove interviewed him. And he has a technique that, again, I've worked on a lot of documentaries, and he's as a director, his technique is interesting because he doesn't want you don't see him while you're talking to the camera, right? So he covers himself up. He is behind the camera, but you don't see him. And he's asking you these questions. So you're in a room essentially by yourself talking about this subject, assuming that this is one of your favorite subjects or it's something that you know about. And so I would have to sit and watch remotely through a video link and talk to him and say, "Hey, ask them more about this," or um, "This is wrong." Make them explain that this happened in '68, not '67, right? So that was my job, right? But first, you have to study. Like, it's really not labor intensive. It's like you have to make yourself an expert, not just on the thing, but how to tell the thing. And you have to write this huge document. And I was working with a bunch of people doing this. It wasn't just me, but I watched every interview, and it was the documentary was taking so long because, like, every time we would do what they call close the documentary, somebody else would get an interview. He'd interview somebody else, and it was people that you'd understand why he would open back up the film. They call it because, like, oh, you can't say, oh, now we don't want to interview Stevie Wonder because we closed the film, or we don't want to interview Michelle and Barack Obama because we closed the film. So we worked on it for it's like it's been 2 years now that we've been working on this thing, and uh, we finally finished, and it's going to be on HBO, and so um, hold on, I want to do something with y'all, and I want to see if this is going to work. Let me know if y'all can hear it. Let me know if y'all can see it. So I want to see if y'all can see and hear what is the new trailer for the Earth, Wind, and Fire documentary. Um, we released it yesterday, and I want to see if y'all can see this. Tell me if you can hear it.
Once you strike that first note, there's something that happens. I feel my heart open up. You get to moving. Bum, bum. Hey, and then you hear. Wow. That's when the funk starts. I'm saying to myself, if they can do that, what can I do? Do you remember? Earth, Wind, and Fire were making a whole different sound. No people were playing no music like that. You're thinking they're coming from Africa or from outer space. Liftoff. It wasn't even a show. It was theater. We tried to bring us together as one. We didn't know what effect it would have on the people. One night, I picked up the kalimba. It kind of inspired me to get an African beat on my own. They've embraced that music could have a higher purpose. I wanted to reach a universal audience, to evolve consciousness through the music and change the world, change the world, change the world. Prince, Michael Jackson, they were down there taking notes, man.
You're absorbing these powerful affirmations.
It appeared that everything we touched turned to gold.
They were defining blackness on their own terms.
They made you feel anything was possible.
So that is the new trailer for the Earth, Wind, and Fire documentary. And I it is, again, this one of the, like, I first of all, it was like a going to college. Like, imagine taking a graduate course but in Earth, Wind, and Fire. That was that was what it was like. And one of the things that we explored is, first of all, it's so fascinating. If you ever get a chance, read Maurice White's autobiography. It first of all is great. It tells you so much about Earth, Wind, and Fire. And Earth, Wind, and Fire is essentially the creation of Maurice White. Like, I always thought that it was like this collaboration of a bunch of great musicians, and it was kind of, but it was all just like one guy was the leader. He was like, one guy was Earth, Wind, and Fire, and everybody else were members. And one of the things that Earth, Wind, and Fire was rooted in was the idea of not necessarily religion, right? Because Maurice White grew up. So the story of Maurice White, I'll take you through a minute. So he grew up in Memphis. Um, this was Memphis in the 40s and the 50s, right? But he was in the band, and like a bunch of the people he grew up around. Remember, Memphis was the home of, like, Beale Street. And so he grew up around a bunch of great musicians who we would later know. His father was a gangster who died when he was little. And so he was raised by his grandmother because his mother moved to Chicago and married a doctor. And he kind of felt inadequate, like, why didn't my mother want me? But he would go up there and visit his other sisters and brothers, intermittently. And then, like, right after he finished high school, he moved to Chicago and lived with his mother and the doctor and his brothers and sisters, including Verdine. And so he gave Verdine, like, okay, you want to be down, like, just play this instrument. I'm gonna give you a a bass guitar. I'm gonna give my brother, teach my brother how to play the drums because Maurice White was a drummer. But he kind of took himself through a graduate level course of playing music after high school, right? He played with the biggest bands. He would write the music for a bunch of commercials, as you'll see in the documentary. But when he was like, I don't know, when he was in Memphis, he used to go to Arkansas to like pick cotton. And according to him, one day he doesn't say it was God, but he implies that it was God talked to him, and he said it was God. I mean, God was his friend, and of course, growing up in the Christian church, he would frame it like that. But he told him, like, gave him a premonition of this, and so it was his path to not glory or fame or riches or anything, but like his purpose, right? And then he goes to Chicago, starts playing music, and gets sick. He's poor, not making a bunch of money, and he sits down on his bench on the sidewalk, and the voice speaks to him again, right? And tells him not to give up. And so he doesn't, and that's what becomes Earth, Wind, and Fire. But goes down this simultaneous path of exploring spirituality, African spirituality. He read everything. He studied Buddhism, Islam, every kind of not even religious ideology, but like metaphysical philosophy. And he kind of not creates his own religion because that would imply that he wanted other people to follow it, but he kind of creates his own personal philosophy. I'm going to treat my body right so he doesn't eat meat. Um, he doesn't use drugs. He doesn't drink. And you couldn't do that. You could eat meat, but you couldn't drink or use drugs if you were in Earth, Wind, and Fire. And so it was a band built around the philosophy, and the music was built around the philosophy, right? That's why he would go to Brazil. That's why he used the kalimba, an African instrument, right? He would go study music of other cultures and other people. And so even though people describe Earth, Wind, and Fire as a funk band, it really wasn't, right? It was like world music. It was a little bit of jazz band. He played jazz most of his career before Earth, Wind, and Fire. It was jazz. They considered themselves a jazz band. And one of my favorite things is that when he creates Earth, Wind, and Fire, right? There are two versions. So there's a version that he creates, like, I'm going to pick all the best musicians that I know. And then he realizes, nah, man, like, so he fires everybody in the band. And the reason he does that, one, is because depending on who you ask, he wanted to be the undisputed leader, or because he wanted young people who didn't have all of these preconceived notions about music, right? So their ideology about music wasn't already embedded in them, and their ideology about spirituality wasn't already embedded in them, and they were going to create something new. So the second version of Earth, Wind, and Fire is the Earth, Wind, and Fire version that you knew, because like the story is interesting because the first version was like their manager was Jim Brown, like for real, like it's wild. But anyway, this idea of metaphysics and so metaphysics is something that is bigger than religion, right? So it's the idea that everything in the universe is interconnected, and that like there really isn't no past, it's present or future. All the physical plane is the same as the spiritual plane. So the like for instance, the pyramids, right? We think of that as something that was 5,000 years ago, but what if the pyramids were created in the future by people who had seen or experienced the future, right? So many fascinating rabbit holes you could go into, like um the idea that the Ark of the Covenant was a future technology that was hidden in Africa. So the Ark of the Ark of the Covenant, the thing that Indiana Jones was looking for in those movies, right? Um, it was, and if you get close to it, like you would fall out. And some people believe it was like, if you look at it through the lens of the future, it was like a nuclear technology or a battery. But anyway, metaphysics, the idea of universality, right? And what he was doing is connecting Islam and Christianity and Buddhism, and not even the idea of a God, right? Because when people say, "Do you believe in God?" I don't even really know what that means. What do you mean by God or a God? What God? Which one? How do you classify that, right? But what Maurice was doing something that black people have always done, right? So when we talk about, I in my book, I posed the idea, and it was not my original idea, but I expand on it. It was proposed by W.E.B. Du Bois that black people, like when people say, we believe in a white man's religion, not really, because what I propose is that the practices of what I call the black religion is not a white man's religion. It is an adaptation of African spirituality, Caribbean spirituality, um, and Christianity and Islam into a belief that we have. So there is a white Christianity, right? Like the Christianity that a lot of us know is like there is no getting around that it is a white religion. And I know there are people saying, but they were practicing Christianity in Africa before it was in, no, not really, right? Like what we're talking about is the King James Bible, all of that, what we know as Christianity was created by white men, right? It was the practices, the holidays, the idea of Easter, all of that is white people stuff, right? And I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just that we can admit that it is white people stuff without saying like you shouldn't believe that. But I mean, you know, again, we were in America before they wrote that Bible, that King James version of the Bible. Black people were here, right? The first black people came to America in 1526. It was 75 years later before the King James version of the Bible came out, right? So, we don't, this is not a question of religion, right? What I'm saying is that what we know, like when you shout and get the Holy Ghost, that is not a Christian thing. That is a black thing, right? That is a black thing, and we call it the Holy Ghost. And unless you were in the Caribbean before the Bible came out, or unless you were in West Africa before the Bible came out, and they were doing the same thing, and we just embedded our beliefs in that version of Christianity, right? Like ain't like the idea of the Holy Ghost, right? Like a thing that can get inside your body has nothing to do with the white man's religion, right? Um, the idea of shouting, like we started dancing, right? And that was not because of Christianity. We was doing it when we was practicing Santeria. We were doing it when we were practicing voodoo, right? All of those things are like the God can inhabit your body predates the Bible, right? And so I understand when people say like Christianity is a white man's religion because they might only know like that Episcopalian or um, Calvinist ideology, and they think that's what white black people are practicing. But I didn't grow up practicing that form of Christianity, right? Like the idea of opening your church service with praise and worship, devotion. Like we gonna shout and sing before we even get to that book that that white man wrote, right? Or remixed. Like so, sometimes I'm at like I remember last year. So every year my fraternity chapter has this. We have an anniversary weekend. We celebrate the original line, the first guys in our chapter, and we were having this cookout, and they were playing. I think the DJ was playing. The DJ at the cookout was playing Earth, Wind, and Fire. And I looked around. Now, some of these guys, again, were too young to really even know what Earth, Wind, and Fire is. Some of the people there were in their 70s. They were older than Earth, Wind, and Fire. And I was sitting around, and the dude, he started playing Earth, Wind, and Fire. And I was realizing everybody, first of all, everybody was dancing, not just get up. They didn't get up and dance and start, moving on the floor, but like you could see them tapping their feet or just bobbing their head. And I realized, oh, they got the Holy Ghost. I mean, that's what it is, really, right? Like, what is that thing inside us that even if it ain't music, I mean, even if it's not Christian, it's the same music, right? Like Earth, Wind, and Fire was playing the same music that the Mississippi Mass Choir was playing, was singing. Like James Cleveland was singing not old Negro spirituals because they weren't Negro. Well, that's why we call them Negro spirituals, not Christian spirituals, because they were blacker than they were Christian, right? Like there were gospel songs, but then there were like Go Down Moses was not about the Moses in the Bible, right? It was an analogy for us. Swing Low, Sweet Chariot was not about, I don't know, going to heaven. So here is the thing that I'm trying to say, that when we talk about like when we talk about Christianity, when we talk about the idea of religion, I don't know, again, after kind of studying and following Maurice White, I don't even know if it is religion or not. It is just us. Like, I tell a story in the book about my grandmother trying to get me to drink pee to cure a cold. That was not Christian. That was just us, right? Like that was her practicing a ancient form. Like now y'all would call it, some of y'all uber religious people would call it witchcraft, conjuring, right? Those people who are beyond TikTok denouncing a black organization because what they read in a white Bible told them it was wrong. Wild to me. Um, and the idea, again, like you can kind of sum it up as magic, right? Like here is a thing that I that fascinates me about black people. I remember I saw so have you ever heard the story of the well, I'll tell you the story. Don't I'm not gonna ask you because I hate when people do that. Have you ever heard this? And then they're gonna tell it anyway, right? So in the late 1600s, early 1700s, a man goes to West Africa and gets a bunch of enslaved people, and they are all from the same kingdom, and he brings them back here. So he brings them on the ocean, and then to bring them into South Carolina, he has to transfer them to a boat, a smaller boat, and bring them inland, like near Georgetown, the Low Country. So when he transfers them on the boat, of course, to take them from one boat, he has to chain them together. And they seem like unreasonably calm. And that night when they're when they're going inland, he hears them chanting, and it gets louder and louder chanting. And what they're saying is, the water gods brought us here, and the water god would take us home. And it was all these people were Igbo, so they were saying it the same language at the same time. The water god brought us here, and the water gods brought us home. And again, they're chained together, so you assume that they can't escape, but they do. They all walk off the boats and into the ocean at the same time, still chanting, the water gods brought us here. The water god will take us home. And they call it an example of mass suicide, right? Is it suicide though, right? That's a question we can explore, right? If you refuse to be enslaved, is that a revolt also? But anyway, they walk off the boat. We know they walked off the boat, right? Like every account. Now, here's the problem. Some people say they flew away, and some people say they drowned themselves. Now, growing up in South Carolina, there's always been people who say they see people flying, right? These people believe some people believe, like the Gullah people believe, like my people believe, like, oh yeah, some people can fly. Some people got superpowers. Some people got magic. You know it, right? Just like in Christianity, when you view it through the lens of Christianity, like some people got a little bit more Holy Ghost than other people, right? Like some people can pray. People think I'm lying when I say I have literally seen my grandmother pray the air back into a tire. I am not lying. The possibility of magic it exists, right? That's some people call it magic. Some people call it the Holy Ghost. Some people call it metaphysics. But it is inside us, right? Some people can make magic with music. It is just sounds, right? Why is it that some people, because you think about what music is, right? Music is the ability to manipulate waves of sound to make it pleasing to the ear. Like they say, some people got perfect pitch. You've heard two people can sing the same note at the same pitch. One just sounds better. What kind of magic is that? What kind of magic is it that you can hear the ability to you can hold the ability to manipulate music manipulate sound waves in your head. Like you know how to put those things together. We can call it talent, but some people can do it. I can study it, and I will never be as talented as Maurice White. That is magic, y'all. Like, and like I remember when I asked my grandmother about that. So that they call that the Ebo landing, right? That story. And so my grandmother said, I was like, well, can some people fly? And she says, well, I ain't never seen nobody fly. So that's crazy to say some people can fly. But it's also crazy. This is what she said. But it's also crazy to say nobody can fly. That nobody in the history of the world can fly. Some people have magic. Some people can talk to you. Their voices have a better timbre than others. Some people have the ability to dance, like to move their body. And to think that these talents, that magic, only exists on some parts of the physical plane and not the others is crazy. I'm not saying people can fly, but I'm saying it's crazy to think that nobody can fly. So now here's a thing that always fascinated me too. Do you know there's a group of people who believe, depending on who you ask, that Harriet Tubman was a priestess or a witch, right? And when I say depending on who you ask, I'm talking about Harriet Tubman's family. So here's a part of Harriet Tubman's story that blows your mind. Now I know y'all all heard that she got hit over the head, and then after she got hit over the head, she started having visions, right? And sometimes she said she could see the future, but that's not true. Harriet Tubman never said that. Like somebody who wrote Harriet, one of the early biographies of Harriet Tubman, just put that shit together. Like a white person just put that shit together and made it up. Harriet Tubman did get hit over the head and got beaten badly by a person who her slave master hired her out to. And Harriet Tubman had visions. But nobody but that white person who wrote that biography put those two together. This is what her brother said. And this is wild, right? Because this is, again, it makes me, it make you rethink everything, right? So her brother always said Harriet Tubman got hit by a star. And that's what gave her magic. That's why she could see shit. That's why everybody would listen to her. So he says that Harriet Tubman, like when they were young, the sky started falling. And everybody went into the house because they thought it was the end of the world. Everybody was hiding in their cabins. And there are other enslaved people who report the same thing. And then, but Harriet Tubman said she wanted to go outside. And she went outside, and her brother, nobody went outside with her to see this, of course, because the fucking world was ending. And when she came out back inside, he said that's when she got her magic. Now, it sounds like a crazy story. And it always was a crazy story. So, except, and I'm looking this up because I want to get the date right. Except in like 1993, or maybe later than that, because it was when they started putting started digitizing newspapers, that they discovered that in 1833, like around the same time, like maybe a few months before, that Harriet Tubman was beaten by um, that that there was, and again, they didn't discover this until like years later when they began digitizing newspapers, and one person said, "Well, there was a lot of reports of the same astrological um, phenomenon the same night." So it was the Great Leonid meteor shower of November 12th through November 13th, 1833. Right, but again, they didn't realize that this just happened until very recently. So they thought, "Oh, her brother must be crazy." Fucking stars did come out of the sky. And Harriet Tubman was the one of the few people who went outside. And I'm not saying that's how she got magical powers, right? But here's a question, like just scientifically. Of all the enslaved people who were beaten, like it is just as likely that she developed those visions from a beating as from those meteor showers, right? Because a bunch of people got beat. None of them got magic powers. And I'm not saying like Harriet Tubman was a witch or a priestess. Google Harriet Tubman was a witch. I promise you it's going to blow your mind. Now, here is the crazy part about that Harriet Tubman thing. So, a few weeks later, a few years later, when she begins to become an adult, her family by then realizes that, like, I think she got superpowers, right? So she asked them, like, "Hey, all y'all give me all y'all money." And they thought like she was gonna buy their freedom or not, something, because all of them wanted to be free. But she didn't. She took that money and gave it to a lawyer and told him to like look up her family lineage. The lawyer looks up her family lineage and discovers that the grandfather of the slave master who owned them had actually set their mother free. Like her mother was supposed to be free. They weren't even supposed to be enslaved. They were illegally enslaved. Now what's she gonna do? She can't go to court and say, they enslaved me illegally. So when the lawyer tells her this, first of all, Harriet Tubman hated her slave master anyway. And she said she used to pray for him, pray to God that he'd change him. Now, this is what Harriet Tubman said. Then she started praying to God to kill him. A week later, y'all, this man drops dead. This is like, again, in the biography written by a white man, it's a coincidence. Harriet Tubman said she prayed for that man to die, and he died. So when he died, Harriet Tubman says she tells her family she has another vision. They're gonna break us up. Now was her mom's biggest fear was that they were going to be sold, which is why her mom was kind of obsessed with like when either Harriet or her brothers would get out of her vision, she would just like get worried. And also the lawyer also uncovered for Harriet. Harriet didn't know this, her brothers didn't know this, but they had older brothers and sisters who had been sold away, which is why her mother was so obsessed. So Harriet has a vision that they were going to break their family up. The new slave master who had inherited him from the one that Harriet killed with her thoughts was going to sell them. So Harriet and her brothers ran away. Her brothers had families. They changed their minds and they come back. And again, nobody can explain why like they didn't get in trouble or anything. So a few days after they come back, Harriet has this friend named Mary. She works in the house. Again, the white people say, well, she was a woman of remarkable strength, Harriet Tubman. Again, she had super strength. And so she would always work with the men. But she said, I'm going to run away by myself if my brothers don't want to run away. But she wanted her friend Mary to know. But Mary worked in the house. She worked outside because she had super strength. And the man who was their overseer, he didn't own them because they were hired out. That's a whole nother thing that we can get into. They used to hire people, didn't just own slaves. They made money from the slaves' labor, not just by picking cotton, but like they just hired this enslaved people out. So the man who she was hired out to was mean. He didn't like them to sing. He didn't like them to hum. The white biographer said he was just an ornery man. Harriet and her brother said he thought it was witchcraft. Now, which one is right? So he comes. Harriet wants to run away, and she wants to tell her girlfriend, her friend, like, I want to let you know that I'm leaving. So she starts singing this song. Now, again, this ornery overseer, he didn't like for them to be practicing that magic around him. So first, everybody starts singing it with him, with Harriet. And he comes, and everybody goes quiet. Quiet. Harriet keeps singing, and she gets louder and louder so Mary can hear it. Now, she walks up to this slave master. This is in every version. All of this, what I'm telling you, is in every version. She walks up to the slave master, and then she walks past him. They were inside a gate. And she's singing louder and louder and louder. And she walks past the slave master. He doesn't touch her. Now, she's walking, and she walks outside the gate. Now, the crazy thing about this is she had just run away, right? And she's defying this overseer. And the song stops. And he turns around, and Harriet is gone. Now, in the white version, they say she snuck into the woods. That ain't what Harriet said. That ain't what nobody said except this white biographer who wrote it 10 years later. They say she disappeared into thin air. And I guess the white biographer translated that into meaning, oh, they couldn't literally mean she disappeared. How do you know it wasn't magic? Now, here's the thing. I want y'all to look this up. Like, pull up Harriet Tubman's Wikipedia page right now, because this is going to blow your mind. Pull it up. I'm going to give you like 5 seconds to pull it up. Harriet Tubman Wikipedia. And I'm sure there's like a section that says escape. I'm going to pull it up myself in case you are not are listening on your phone. And because this is the thing that is wild about how they teach us history, about our ability to not believe in magic. And is that so Harriet Tubman runs away, right? Here's what it says in that page, right? Sometime in October or November, Tubman escaped again, this time without her brothers. Before leaving, she sang a farewell song to hint at her intentions, which she hoped would be understood by Mary, a trusted fellow slave. I'll meet you in the morning, she intoned. I'm bound for the promised land. Again, she intoned or was practicing magic. While her route is unknown, Tubman made use of the network known as the Underground Railroad. Blah, 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 blah. From there, she probably took a common route for people fleeing slavery, northeast along the Choptank River through Delaware, then north into Pennsylvania. A journey of nearly 90 miles by foot would have taken between 5 days and 3 nights. Tap, Tubman had to travel by night, guided by the North Star, blah, 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 blah. But listen, the point of me reading this is there is absolutely zero evidence that Harriet Tubman escaped on the Underground Railroad. Zero, none. There is not a single human being in the history of this planet who said, "Yeah, I helped her slave, or I helped her escape, or I hid her, or anything." It's just like something we believe. Now we know that subsequent trips she used the Underground Railroad, that she had with people that she had gotten to know and had given them um, the kind of a plan, right? But all we know is that Harriet Tubman was singing a song. She disappeared, and then she appeared in a place where she was free. That's all. Like, like it's wild to think, like logically, critically. Why we ain't never heard nobody say, you know how proud a white person would have been to say, you know, I was the one who helped Harriet Tubman escape. We don't have any accounts of that. Harriet Tubman even never even talked about her escape until she was 90. She never told her path. Now, again, some people say, well, she didn't talk about it because she was trying to protect the people who helped her escape. You know, she didn't want to give away the secrets of the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman lived until like the 1900s. Harriet Tubman, slavery was long. It's like she was literally died in 1913, which is also wild that Harriet Tubman died like 11 years before Martin Luther King was born. Which is wild, right? Like we think of these things as these two people is way for like one is very recent and one is far in the past. Like, nah, Martin Luther King knew people who knew Harriet Tubman, right? Anyway, we have concocted the story to eliminate the possibility of magic, right? We have told our stories in a way, right? Again, when you frame God as a Christian idea, when you frame what we do through the lens of a singular religion, when it was a combination of religion, right? Like what do you do at a black church? How do you give your offering? You take your money and you walk up and around. We march up and around the offering table. That's an Islamic practice. That's the Kaaba. We what Du Bois said is we embedded African spirituality into and Islam into the Christian religion. We made Christianity ours, right? Again, when white people, there's a group of white people who be shouting and singing our songs, but you can always tell that they choir. They hitting the same notes. They singing, they on the same beat. They ain't got their magic. Why do all black people, when this mysterious Holy Ghost inhabits our body, why everybody, regardless of where they were, how they grew up, why everybody shout kind of the same when that magic get into them? And why is that shout like when the Q Dog step? And why is that shout like when Hammer do the Running Man? And why is that shout like all the other shouting? Why do we eliminate the possibility of magic? Right? And the idea of telling our stories in the way that somebody, like through the rules that someone else has defined, is always interesting to me. And that's what we try to do, right? So the story is that when Maurice, um, when Earth, Wind, and Fire got successful, he rented out this compound in Colorado, right? This is how we started the narrative part, the thing that I wrote, right? So he rented out he, this compound in Colorado that a bunch of people had written hit records at, right? And the whole band goes out there. And the people who had recorded records there before told him, hey, y'all got to be careful. He said, why? He said, you know, it's ghosts out here. And Maurice and uh, Maurice and Philip Bailey was out one night, and they say the songs just started coming to them. You're a shining star, no matter who you are. And we're associating that with talent. Some people call it, well, the chemistry of the band was off, or the energy of the band was off. Now, like, we'll say that. You're talking about magic. You're talking about when these, because a lot of this music, they didn't like, you can't find like sheet music for it. They would just get together and start playing, and a song would appear. We will accept that, but not the other magic. Maurice White and Earth, Wind, and Fire can be, is magic, right? It is, I mean, unquestionably magic. What they do, you can't recreate it. It has no physical or psychological or scientific explanation why their stuff sounds better than other stuff. It's magic. It's metaphysical. And by confining the way we tell our stories under the auspices or through the lens of what white people are willing to believe is crazy. Some people can fly. Some people, we seen it and said, nah, it can't, them people don't be flying. Like all of those people on those Gullah Islands, there are reports of seeing the Ebo fly, but they're dismissed because, come on, y'all. Maurice said God spoke to him. Right? Harriet Tubman, brother said, nah, she just got hit by some stardust. And 100 years later, we found out, nah, there was actually a meteor shower that night. What will it take us for us to believe in our own magic? What? I don't know. But we're out of time. I want to thank y'all for coming, and I'll see y'all in camp.